The first thing Zara noticed was the blood. Not the rain, not the darkness swallowing the empty warehouse district whole. Not the way her GPS had led her down 3 wrong turns to deliver a sushi order she wasn't even sure was real. The blood came first, a dark ribbon sliding beneath a rusted metal door, thin and deliberate, like something alive trying to escape. She stopped walking. Her delivery bag hung from one hand. Her phone glowed in the other. The app said she was at the right address. Unit 14B, Caldwell Industrial Park. Drop-off confirmed. No signature required. Zara looked at the blood again. She should have left. Any reasonable person would have left. Called 911 from the car, driven away, filed the story under Not My Problem, and picked up her next order. She had 4 more deliveries tonight. Her rent was 3 days late. She had exactly $47 in her account and a full tank of gas she'd paid for in quarters. She did not have time for this. But then she heard it. A sound so small and so desperate it cut through the rain, through the distant highway noise, through every practical thought in her head. A baby crying. Then a second one. Zara's hand was on the door before her brain caught up. She pulled it open. The smell hit her first, blood and gunpowder and cold air. She scanned the darkness with her phone flashlight, her heart slamming against her ribs, and found him 12 feet in, a man on the concrete floor, propped halfway against an overturned metal shelf, one hand pressed to his side, the other arm wrapped around 2 infant carriers that had been placed against his leg. The bobbies were screaming. The man was not. He looked at her with eyes that were impossibly calm for someone bleeding out on a warehouse floor. Dark eyes. Focused. Taking her in with a precision that didn't match the situation, like she was information he was processing instead of a stranger who just walked in on something she could never unsee. "Close the door," he said. His English was perfect, low, controlled, a voice that expected to be obeyed without the indignity of asking twice. Zara closed the door. She didn't know why. Later, she would ask herself that question 100 times. She closed the door because something in his voice made it clear that whatever was outside was worse than whatever was in here with him. "The bobbies," he said. "Check them." She moved to the carriers on instinct, crouching down, her delivery bag hitting the floor. 2 infants, both in identical gray sleep suits, maybe 4 or 5 months old. Their faces were red and scrunched and furious, but when Zara placed a hand on each one, checking, feeling, she found no injuries. Just fear and cold and the desperate need for someone to tell them it was going to be okay. "They're not hurt," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "They're just scared and cold." "Good." The word came out tight, compressed, like he'd been holding it until she confirmed. Zara turned to him. Up close, he was younger than she'd first thought, maybe early 30s. He had the kind of face that belonged in silence, sharp and composed and saying very little. His suit was expensive and ruined, the jacket gone, his dress shirt soaked dark from a wound below his ribs that he was pressing with a folded cloth already saturated through. "You need an ambulance," she said. "No." "Sir." "No ambulance." His eyes moved to the door behind her, then back. "No police, no one." Zara stared at him. "You're bleeding out on a warehouse floor with 2 bobbies." "I'm aware," he exhaled slowly, controlled. "Do you have a first aid kit in your bag?" "I have soy sauce packets and a fortune cookie." Something moved behind his eyes, not quite amusement, a recognition, maybe, of the absurdity of the moment. It passed in under a second. "Your jacket," he said. "Take it off, press it here." He lifted his hand just enough to show her the wound. "Firm pressure, don't stop." "I'm not a nurse." "You're here," he said it simply, like that was all that mattered. "That makes you enough." Zara had delivered to this part of the city for 2 years. She'd knocked on doors that didn't open. She'd walked away from situations that smelled wrong. She knew the look of someone dangerous, and she knew the look of someone who was trying to get home to something. This man had both looks at the same time. She took off her jacket. She pressed it to his wound. He didn't flinch, not even a breath. He took the pain the way stone takes weather, absorbing it, unmoved, giving nothing back. The bobbies had quieted slightly when Zara moved closer. One of them, the one on the left, had reached out a tiny fist and was gripping the air. "What are their names?" she asked, because she needed something human in this room. He looked at her for a moment. "Hana, Seo." "Which is which?" "Hana is louder." A pause. "She always has been." Zara almost smiled. Instead, she pressed harder against the wound and said, "My name is Zara, Zara Cole, and I really need you to tell me what's happening right now because I'm 3 minutes from calling 911 regardless of what you say." The man was quiet. "Then, my name is Kangmin Park." He said it the way someone sets down something very heavy, like the name itself had weight. "And if the people looking for me find this building before I can move, we will all die, you included." The rain hit the roof. The bobbies breathed. Zara kept pressing. "Okay," she said, "then talk fast." He didn't talk fast. He didn't talk at all for almost 2 minutes. He sat with his back against the shelf, breathing with that same unnatural control, watching the door the way a man watches something he already knows is coming. Patient, prepared, like danger was simply a weather pattern he'd learned to read. Zara kept her hands on the wound. The jacket beneath her palms was warm now, soaked through. "You need more pressure than this," she said. "I need something better to pack it with." He reached into his jacket, the one crumpled beside him, and produced a folded square of cloth that looked like it had been prepared in advance. She took it without asking questions, replaced the jacket, pressed hard. He absorbed it. "Your phone," he said. "What about it? Is your location sharing on?" Zara frowned. "The delivery app tracks me, yeah." "Turn it off, all of it, every app, now." "That'll cancel my deliveries." "Turn it off." She looked at him, that voice again, not loud, not aggressive. It simply did not leave room for argument the way a locked door doesn't leave room for entry. She picked up her phone with one hand, kept the other pressed against his side, and disabled her location. Then the app, then her mobile data. "Wi-Fi too," he said. She turned that off. The warehouse went very quiet. Just rain and 2 small breathing infants, and the sound of a man bleeding slowly in the dark. "Good," Kangmin said. "Now will you tell me what's happening?" He looked at her, that steady, measuring look she was already beginning to recognize, the way he cataloged things, filed them, like every piece of information was being sorted and stored for later use. "How many orders did you have left tonight?" 4. "Same route every night?" "Mostly." "Anyone know you came this way?" "The app logged it before I turned it off." He nodded once. She could see him thinking behind his eyes, working through something methodically, like a man moving pieces on a board only he could see. "Someone placed that order specifically," he said, "to get a door opened. They needed someone on the outside to trigger the loading dock sensor. Delivery drivers bypass it automatically when they scan in." Zara stared at him. "You're saying the sushi order was a trap?" "Not for you," he exhaled slowly. "For me." "They used me too." She stopped. The cold that moved through her had nothing to do with the rain outside. "You were a key," he said. "Not a target, there's a difference." He said it like that should comfort her. It didn't. "Who are they?" He was quiet again. "Kangmin," she said his name deliberately. "I'm the one with my hands in your blood right now. You owe me an answer." Something shifted in his expression, so small she almost missed it. A recalibration, maybe, like he'd just added her to a category he hadn't created yet. "A faction inside my organization," he finally said. "Men who decided that a leadership change was overdue." Zara processed that. "Your organization?" "Yes." "What kind of organization requires a leadership change carried out with guns in a warehouse?" He held her gaze and said nothing. She looked at his hands, the knuckles, the faint scarring she hadn't noticed before along his forearms. She looked at the way the 2 infant carriers had been positioned against his body, not carelessly, not in panic, but with deliberate precision. angled to shield them. His own torso between the bobbies and the door. Even bleeding, even alone, he'd made himself the wall. "You're Mafia," she said. The word landed in the air between them. He didn't confirm it. He didn't deny it. He simply let it sit there, which was confirmation enough. Zara had grown up in the south side of Chicago. She knew what silence in place of denial meant. She'd watched her uncle take that same kind of quiet to his grave. "The Bobbies," she said, "are they yours?" "Yes." "Where's their mother?" A pause, brief, the only moment she'd seen anything crack in him. "Gone." She didn't push it. Hannah, the louder one, had started to fuss again. Small, frustrated sounds, her fists working against the air. Zara glanced at the carriers. There was a bag beside them. Formula tin, bottles, a small fleece blanket folded tight. He'd packed for them. In the middle of running for his life, bleeding from a gunshot wound, this man had packed diapers and formula and a blanket. Something in Zara's chest moved in a direction she wasn't ready to examine. "Can you hold pressure yourself for 2 minutes?" His eyes moved to her. "I need to feed one of them before she screams loud enough to tell everyone in the district where we are." She held his gaze. "Can you hold it or not?" He placed his hand over hers and took the pressure without a word. She moved to the bag, found a pre-made bottle, lifted Hannah out of the carrier with the practiced ease of someone who had younger cousins and a neighborhood full of bobbies. The infant quieted the moment she was held, that immediate, trusting collapse of tension that only the very young are capable of. Zara fed her standing up in a dark warehouse with a mafia boss bleeding 5 feet away. The world had genuinely lost its mind. "She likes you," Kangmin said. His voice was still controlled, but something had shifted in it, a texture that hadn't been there before. "Bobby's like anyone warm and calm." Zara watched the infant drink. "I'm good at pretending to be calm." "Pretending," he repeated. "I'm terrified. My hands were shaking before, I just hide it." He looked at her for a long moment. "So do I." She looked up. His face gave nothing away, but the words sat differently than she expected, like an admission from someone who had never made one before and wasn't entirely sure why he'd made it now. A sound from outside cut the moment clean. Footsteps, more than one person, moving along the exterior wall, slow and deliberate, the kind of movement that had nothing to do with passing through. They were searching. Kangmin's eyes went to the door. When they came back to Zara, all warmth was gone, replaced by something cold and precise and ancient. "Back wall," he said quietly. "Now take both bobbies, do not make a sound." "What are you going to?" "Zara." Her name in his mouth was something different from how strangers usually said it. Weighted, purposeful, like he'd already decided she mattered. "Trust me for the next 60 seconds, please." She grabbed Sio's carrier, lifted Hannah against her chest, moved to the back wall without another word. The footsteps outside stopped. A beam of light slid under the door. And Kangmin Park, bleeding and barely upright, rose to his feet like the pain was simply a thing that happened to other men. He stood like the wound meant nothing. That was the part Zara couldn't process. A man with a soaked cloth pressed to his side, pale from blood loss, rising to his full height in the dark like something that couldn't be diminished by something as ordinary as a bullet. He straightened his shirt, adjusted his cuffs. 2 small, deliberate gestures that made no practical sense and somehow made complete sense at the same time. He was not preparing to beg. He was not preparing to run. He was preparing to be exactly what he was. Zara pressed herself against the back wall, both bobbies against her body, Hannah tucked to her chest and Sio's carrier gripped in her right hand. She could feel the infant's heartbeat against her collarbone. Fast and small and trusting in a way that made her own terror feel like a luxury she couldn't afford. She watched Kangmin reach behind the fallen shelf. He produced a gun with the same casualness another man might produce a phone. Checked it once. A single practiced motion, magazine, chamber, safety, and then his hand lowered and the weapon disappeared against his thigh. The beam of light under the door moved, steadied. Then the handle turned. Two men came in fast, the way trained men enter spaces, low, split, covering angles. They wore dark clothing and earpieces and carried themselves with the particular confidence of people who had done this before and expected it to be easy. They found Kangmin standing in the center of the room. Just standing, still, hands at his sides. The taller one spoke in Korean, sharp, a command. Kangmin answered in the same language. His voice was unchanged, that same low, measured register he'd used with Zara, as if the two armed men in front of him were a minor scheduling inconvenience. Whatever he said made the taller man pause. Not long, a second, maybe less, but Zara saw it, that fractional hesitation that told her Kangmin's words had landed somewhere unexpected, like he'd said something that changed the shape of the room. Then everything happened very fast. Kangmin moved left, not a scramble, a decision, clean and immediate, like a man who had already mapped the room before anyone else entered it. The first shot came from the taller man and hit the shelf where Kangmin had been standing. Metal shrieked. Zara bit down on a sound that wanted to become a scream. Hana startled in her arms but didn't cry. Kangmin closed the distance to the second man in 4 steps. No wasted motion. No dramatics. He moved the gun arm aside with one hand and used the other with a precision Zara didn't have the vocabulary for, controlled, structural, something that ended the man's ability to continue in under 3 seconds. The second man hit the floor. The first turned. Kangmin already had the gun up. "Kneel," he said, in English this time, clear, quiet. The man looked at him, looked at his colleague on the floor, looked at the weapon. He knelt. Kangmin approached him slowly. No rush, no fury. The controlled violence Zara was witnessing had no anger in it. That was the part that unsettled her most. He wasn't reacting. He was executing. Every movement was the product of a decision already made, and the decision had been made long before these men walked through the door. He crouched in front of the kneeling man, said something low in Korean. The man answered, quickly, the words tumbling out with the particular speed of someone recalculating their situation in real time. Kangmin listened, nodded once. Then he stood and hit the man precisely at the base of the skull with the handle of his weapon. The man folded without drama. Out, breathing, Zara could see, but out. Silence returned to the warehouse. Kangmin turned to her. He looked at the bobbies first, a scan so fast and thorough it was almost clinical. Checking. Then his eyes moved to her face, and for a moment he simply looked at her the way he'd looked at her when she first walked in, taking inventory. Processing. "You didn't run," he said. "I had both bobbies." Her voice was steadier than it had any right to be. "I wasn't exactly mobile." "You could have screamed." "And then what?" He was quiet for a moment. "Most people would have." "I'm not most people." She looked at the man unconscious on the floor, then back at Kangmin. "Is he dead?" "No." "The other one?" "No." "Why not?" He looked at her. Something in the question seemed to interest him. "Because it wasn't necessary." Zara absorbed that. She looked at him, really looked. The blood had soaked through his shirt again. His face was pale in the way that meant the body was making hard choices about where to send what it had left. He was still standing through something that should have had him on the floor. "You need to sit down," she said. "We need to move." "You need to sit down first." She laid Sio's carrier carefully on the floor and pointed at the wall. 30 seconds, sit." He looked at her for a beat too long. Then he sat. Zara crouched in front of him, Hana still against her chest, and peeled back the soaked cloth. The wound was bad. Not catastrophically bad, she had no idea how she knew the difference, but something in her gut told her it had missed the things that mattered by a margin that was either luck or extraordinary circumstance. But it needed closing, needed cleaning, needed far more than a delivery driver in a warehouse could provide. "There's a medical kit in the bag." He nodded toward the carry bag with the formula. "Inside pocket, left side." She found it. Proper supplies, gauze, closure strips, antiseptic. Not a standard first aid kit. Something assembled, deliberately, by someone who understood that emergencies were a professional reality. "You prepared for this," she said. "I prepare for everything." Getting shot. The possibility of getting shot. He watched her work with those dark, steady eyes. "There's a difference." "You sound like you've had this conversation before." "I've had a version of it." A pause. "Never with someone feeding my daughter while having it." Zara pressed the closure strips across the wound with hands that had stopped shaking somewhere in the last 10 minutes. She wasn't sure when. She wasn't sure what that meant about her. "These people who are after you," she said. "How many more?" "Enough." "That's not a number." "No." His jaw tightened, the most visible concession to pain she'd seen from him. "It's not." She secured the gauze, pressed firmly. He absorbed it. "Why do they want you dead?" He looked at her for a long moment. Outside, somewhere distant, a car moved slowly through the industrial park. Both of them heard it. Both of them went still. It passed. Kangmin exhaled. "I lead something," he said carefully. "And what I lead has rules. Those rules protect certain people. Someone inside decided the rules were no longer convenient." "And the bobbies," she looked at Hana, still quiet against her chest. "Why bring them?" Something moved across his face, something deep and unguarded that was gone before she could name it fully. "Because there is no one else." He said it simply, flatly, the way people state facts that have already finished hurting them. "Their mother died 4 months ago. My second in command, a man I trusted for 11 years, arranged it, made it look like an accident." He paused. "I found out 3 days ago." Zara was very still. "The same man arranged tonight," Kangmin continued. "He controls who has access to my children, which means the compound is no longer safe. My security is compromised. My inner circle." He stopped, recalibrated. "I could only trust myself." "So you ran." "I retreated." He said it with the quiet precision of a man for whom the distinction mattered. "There is a difference." Zara looked at him. This man who had taken a bullet and still positioned himself as a shield, who had packed formula and blankets in the middle of a coup against his life, who had knocked men unconscious instead of killing them because it wasn't necessary. She didn't know what she'd expected a mafia boss to look like. "Not this." "My car is outside," she said. He looked at her. "It's a 2019 Honda Civic with a busted rear speaker and a French fry under the passenger seat that's been there since November." She held his gaze. "But it runs, and nobody is looking for it." Kangmin Park studied her face the way he studied everything. Completely, thoroughly, like he was reading something written underneath the surface. "You don't know what you're offering," he said. "I know exactly what I'm offering." She stood, adjusted Hana against her chest. "The question is whether you're smart enough to take it." A long silence. Outside, another set of headlights swept the building. Getting closer this time. "The bobbies go in first," he said. He was already rising, already moving, already 3 steps ahead of the moment. "You drive, I'll navigate." "And where are we going?" He picked up Sio's carrier with his good arm, looked at her with those eyes that gave nothing away and somehow communicated everything. "Somewhere they won't think to look." He moved toward the side exit. "Somewhere ordinary." Zara grabbed the supply bag and followed. She didn't know it yet, couldn't have known it, walking out of that warehouse with 2 infants and a bleeding mafia boss into the Chicago rain. But ordinary was the one place she would never again be. She drove with both hands on the wheel and her eyes on the mirrors. Kangmin sat in the passenger seat with Sio's carrier secured beside him and Hana's on the back seat, angled so he could see both without turning his head. He'd done that without instruction, repositioned both carriers the moment they loaded the car, calculating sightlines, checking angles, adjusting the headrest so his peripheral vision covered the rear window. He did it while bleeding. He did it without saying a word about it. Zara noticed. The rain had thickened into something serious, the kind of Chicago downpour that turned streets into rivers and made the whole city feel underwater. Good, she thought. Hard to follow a gray Civic through this. Hard to see anything through this. Left at the signal, Kangmin said. Where are we going? Away from the route they'll expect. He was watching the passenger mirror. Drive like you're going home, normal speed, no urgency. I am going home, she said, technically. He glanced at her. My apartment is 3 miles east. She kept her eyes on the road. It's small and it's on the 4th floor, and my neighbor Mrs. Ackafer goes to bed at 9 and doesn't hear anything after that. Nobody knows I live there except my landlord, and he's in Atlanta until Thursday. Silence from the passenger seat. It's ordinary, she added, because he'd used that word, because it had clearly meant something. Another long pause. She could feel him thinking, that particular quality of stillness that wasn't passive but active. A mind moving fast behind a face that showed nothing. They'll trace your delivery route, he said. Eventually. Not tonight. The app's offline and the order was fake. Whoever placed it doesn't want a digital trail either. You're thinking tactically. I'm thinking practically. She checked the mirror again. Empty street. Rain. I grew up in a neighborhood where you learned to think 3 steps ahead or you didn't last. Same principle. He was quiet for a moment. What neighborhood? Inglewood. Something shifted in his expression, barely visible, but there. Then you understand, he said, that the people I'm dealing with are not the kind you negotiate with. I understand that the people you're dealing with shot you, planted a fake food order to blow your location, and sent 2 men to a warehouse where your bobbies were. She glanced at him. I'm not confused about what kind of situation this is. He looked at her with that measuring expression. Then he looked back at the road. 4th floor, he said. Single stairwell or multiple? Single, fire escape on the east side. Parking. Lot behind the building, covered. He nodded, decision made. She pulled into her lot 11 minutes later. Killed the engine. Sat for a moment, listening to the rain and the small sounds of 2 sleeping infants who had somehow drifted off in the warmth of the moving car. I'll take CO, Kangmin said. You take Honor in the bag. You have a bullet wound. I'm aware. Kangmin. I will not let someone else carry my children when I have 2 working arms. He said it quietly. No heat in it, just absolute certainty. One of them is temporarily inconvenienced. That leaves one that works fine. Zara looked at him for a beat. Then she got out of the car. Getting 2 infant carriers, a supply bag, a wounded man, and herself up 4 flights of stairs in the rain without making noise was not something Zara had ever trained for. They managed it in 6 minutes. Kangmin carried CO the entire way without showing a single sign that it cost him anything. She knew it cost him everything. She kept her comments to herself. Her apartment was what it was. Small. Clean. The kind of clean that came from having very little to make a mess with. A second-hand couch in good condition. A kitchen table with 2 chairs. Books stacked along the wall because she'd never gotten around to buying a shelf. The window above the sink looked out over the parking lot and the street beyond, practical, not pretty. She'd never been embarrassed about it before. She wasn't embarrassed now, exactly. But she was aware of it in a new way, watching Kangmin Park walk through the door. He didn't look around with judgment. He looked around with the same systematic attention he applied to everything, clocking exits, windows, sightlines. He moved to the window without being asked and stood to one side of it, looking down at the street below. Good angle, he said quietly. You can see the lot without being seen. I know, she set Hannah's carrier on the couch. I chose the apartment for the window. He turned to look at her. Old habit, she said simply, and left it there. She made up a sleeping space for the twins on her bedroom floor, the carriers positioned side by side, a folded blanket beneath each one for cushioning. She changed Hannah, who woke briefly and stared up at Zara with enormous dark eyes that were so precisely her father's it was almost unsettling. Then she went back out. Kangmin had not moved from the window. Come sit down, she said. I need to look at that wound again. It's manageable. It was manageable 2 hours ago. It's been 2 hours. She pulled a chair from the kitchen table and set it in the center of the room. Sit. He looked at the chair, looked at her. He sat. She cleaned the wound properly this time with better light and steadier hands. It was deep, but the closure strips were holding. No signs of the internal catastrophe she'd been afraid of. She added fresh gauze, wrapped it clean, and pressed 2 fingers to his wrist to check his pulse. Strong, steady, like the rest of him. "You've done this before," he said. "Field first aid course, community college." She released his wrist. "I wanted to be a paramedic." Wanted. Tuition got complicated. She sat back. Life got complicated. He looked at her in the lamplight. Something had shifted in the quality of his attention. It was still precise, still watchful, but it had acquired a different texture. Less tactical, more personal. "Zara Cole," he said, like he was placing her, filing her properly somewhere. "Kangmin Park," she returned. Same weight, same deliberateness. "You should know what you've gotten into." He said it without preamble, no softening. Fully. "Tell me." "My name in certain circles is not Kangmin Park." He paused. "It's a name that causes a particular reaction in people. Compliance. Fear. The kind of distance that keeps everyone safe. But not safe enough to stop someone from shooting you. That person knew me before the name meant anything." Something cold moved through his eyes. "Which makes the betrayal more precise. You're second in command." "Jiang Yujin." He said the name the way you say something you're going to have to deal with eventually. 11 years. He built the intelligence network. He controls the communication channels. He knows every protocol, every safe house, every emergency contact. He paused. "He also knows I have no family left to run to, no one outside the organization." Then he didn't account for wrong turns and fake sushi orders. Kangmin looked at her. For the first time, the very first time, something crossed his face that wasn't control. Something small and unguarded and almost startled. "No," he said, "he didn't." Zara stood and went to her kitchen. She ran a glass of water and brought it back with 2 ibuprofen from the cabinet. Inadequate, she knew, but what she had. He took them without comment. "What does he want?" she asked. "Yujin, what's the endgame?" "Control of the organization's eastern operations. 3 ports, distribution networks, contracts worth more than most countries see in a year." He turned the glass in his hands. "He needs me dead and the twins vulnerable. If I die without a named successor, the council defaults to a committee vote. He has 4 of the 8 members in his pocket." "And the twins?" "Heirs." The word was flat. "My children are leverage whether I'm alive or dead. With me gone, they become tools for whoever controls them." The rain hit the window. Zara thought about Hana's eyes, about Sio's small fingers curled in sleep. "That's not going to happen," she said. He looked at her. She didn't explain it, didn't dress it up. She just said it the way he said things, simply, with the quiet weight of a decision already made. Something happened in Kangmin Park's expression then. Not dramatic, not obvious, but real. The way light changes in a room when a cloud moves, the source is somewhere else but the effect is here, immediate, undeniable. He looked at her like she was something he hadn't calculated for. Like she was a variable that changed the shape of the problem entirely. His phone, a secondary one she hadn't seen him produce, vibrated in his hand. He looked at the screen. His jaw tightened. "Eugen's sent a message to the council," he said quietly. "He's telling them I'm unstable, that I took the twins and ran, that I'm a liability to the organization. He's framing you." "He's been framing me for weeks." He set the phone down. "By morning, he'll have a story that justifies whatever comes next." "Then we need a better story." Zara crossed her arms. "One that gets to the council first." He looked at her steadily. "We." She held his gaze without flinching. "You have 2 bobbies asleep on my bedroom floor. I drove you across the city in the rain. I patched your wound twice." She tilted her head. "We." Kangmin Park was quiet for a long moment. Outside, the rain continued its serious business. Inside, something had shifted, quiet and irreversible, like a door that opens only once and doesn't go back. "There's one council member," he said slowly, "who hasn't been bought, A man named Chairman Beek. He's old, he's cautious, but he's honest. He paused. If I can get proof to him before Eugen consolidates the vote. How long do we have? 36 hours, maybe less. Zara nodded, thought. Then sleep first, she said. 2 hours, you're no use to your children or your council running on blood loss and adrenaline. She stood. I'll take the first watch. He stared at her. I'll sit by the window, she said. You sleep. Then we figure out how to burn Eugen's story to the ground. For a moment, he simply looked at her. This ordinary woman in a small apartment with a second-hand couch and books on the floor and a window she'd chosen on purpose. This woman who'd walked into a warehouse and just stayed. Why, he said quietly, genuinely. Zara picked up the glass from the table and carried it to the sink. Because, she said, somebody should have stayed for those bobbies a long time ago. She pulled a blanket from the closet and settled into the chair by the window. She didn't look back at him. But she heard the exact moment Kangmin Park, the man whose name made entire rooms go quiet, lay down on her second-hand couch and let himself, for the first time in God knows how long, be still. She watched the street for 2 hours and nothing moved. That was almost worse than something moving. Stillness in the wrong situation wasn't peace, it was patience. The particular patience of people who were good at waiting, because they'd learned that waiting was how you made someone feel safe before you took everything from them. Zara knew that kind of patience. She'd grown up watching it operate on her block. The slow, deliberate stillness before everything went wrong. The quiet that preceded loss. She kept watching. At 2:47 a.m., Kangmin woke without an alarm. No groggy transition, no slow climb back to consciousness. One moment still, the next sitting upright, eyes open and oriented, hand moving toward where he'd placed the weapon before he'd even fully registered where he was. Then he saw her at the window. His hand stilled. Nothing, she said quietly. Street's been empty. One car passed at 1:15, didn't slow down. He was quiet for a moment, reading her the way he read everything. Then he stood, rolled his shoulder experimentally, checked his wound with 2 fingers pressed briefly against the gauze. The twins. Checked them 20 minutes ago, both sleeping. He nodded, moved to the window and stood beside her, not close enough to crowd her, close enough that she could feel the particular quality of his attention redirect itself from inward to outward, scanning the street, the lot, the building angles. You should have woken me at the 2-hour mark, he said. You needed 3. He looked at her sideways. You lost significant blood, she said. 2 hours wasn't enough and we both knew it. I'm not going to compromise your functioning over a schedule. She kept her eyes on the street. You're more useful at 60% than most people at 100, but 60 wasn't going to cut it tonight. A long silence. You calculated that, he said. I thought it through, yes. Another silence, different from the others, more considered. Tell me about your brother, he said. Zara turned to look at him. He was watching the street. I didn't mention a brother. The way you watch exits, the way you chose this apartment, the way you speak about neighborhoods and thinking ahead. He paused. Someone taught you, someone whose lessons came from experience rather than textbooks. She looked back at the street. Marcus, she said, older by 6 years. He ran with people he shouldn't have when we were young, taught me everything he knew about staying safe in situations that weren't. She paused. He got out eventually, moved to Atlanta, has 2 kids and a contracting business. He survived. He was smart enough to leave before it finished him. She tilted her head slightly. Not everyone gets that window. No, Kangmin's voice was quiet. They don't. Something in the way he said it made her glance at him. His profile in the dark, composed, still, the jaw set in that permanent, controlled expression. But his eyes had that depth that appeared sometimes when the tactical layer thinned, and whatever was underneath came briefly to the surface. Your wife, Zara said carefully. What was her name? A pause. Minjung. How did Eugen do it? His jaw tightened. He arranged a car accident, brake failure. She was driving the twins to a health appointment. They were 2 months old. He stopped, recalibrated. She got them out of the car before it went over the embankment, unbuckled them, passed them to a bystander. Another pause. Then she went back for the diaper bag. Zara closed her eyes briefly. She didn't know the car was going to go, he said. She thought she had time. His voice remained steady. The steadiness of someone who has said a thing to themselves so many times that saying it aloud becomes just another controlled motion. The bystander ran with the bobbies. Minjung went back and the car moved. Silence. She saved them, Zara said. Yes. She sounds like someone worth being angry for. Something shifted in his face. I am not angry, he said it carefully. Anger is a reaction, what I have is a direction. Zara understood that distinction in her bones. She was about to respond when his secondary phone lit up on the kitchen table. He crossed to it in 3 steps. Read the screen. Read it again. His expression didn't change. But the room did. The quality of the air shifted. Something tightened. Some invisible pressure that Zara felt in her chest before he said a single word. What is it? She asked. Eugen, he set the phone down. He's found the warehouse, my car. He paused. He's pulled the delivery app records. He has your name. The words hit like cold water. Your name. Zara didn't move. Didn't allow the fear to do anything productive except sharpen her thinking, the way Marcus had taught her. Fear is information, not instruction. Use it, don't follow it. How long before he has this address? The app has your registration details, but not your home address. He'll have to dig. Kangmin looked at her. 1 hour, maybe 90 minutes if his contact at the data registry is slow. Then we have 90 minutes. Zara, where do we need to go to reach Chairman Beek? He was still. You understand what I'm saying. He has your name. You are now connected to this. When this resolves, she said steadily, however it resolves, I'll deal with what comes after. Right now we have 90 minutes and 2 bobbies and 1 honest man on a council who doesn't know you're alive. She met his eyes. Where is Chairman Beek? Kangmin looked at her for a long moment. In the bedroom, Hana made a small sound in her sleep. Settled. He keeps a residence on the North Shore, Kangmin said. Private, off the books. I've been there twice. He doesn't know I know the address. He paused. It's 40 minutes from here. Then we leave in 20. She was already moving toward the bedroom. I need to change the twins and pack the bag, and I need you to tell me exactly what proof you have against Eugen, and where it's stored, because if we're walking into a council member's private residence at 4 in the morning, we cannot walk in empty-handed. She stopped in the bedroom doorway and turned back. He was watching her with that expression again, the one she couldn't fully name, something between assessment and something that had nothing to do with tactics. The proof, she said again. Do you have it? Not physically. He reached up and pressed 2 fingers to the back of his neck. Beneath his collar, she now noticed, was the edge of something. A tattoo, she'd assumed. But looking closer, a small raised disc, barely visible. Encoded drive, implanted 14 months ago when I realized Eugen's loyalty had shifted. Every transaction, every communication, every order he routed through my name without my knowledge. He paused. Everything the council needs to see. Zara stared at him. You have a drive implanted in your neck. I prepare for everything. You said that before. It keeps being relevant. She almost laughed. She stopped it before it arrived. But something in her chest did a thing she wasn't prepared for, a small, inappropriate warmth that had no business being present in this situation. She turned back to the bobbies. She changed them efficiently, repacked the bag, checked their temperatures, made 2 bottles and sealed them in the insulated pouch. She worked the way she'd learned to work in every difficult situation. Methodically, without wasted motion, the task in front of her receiving her full attention, because full attention was the only thing that kept the fear from becoming noise. When she came back out, Kangmin had changed his shirt. She didn't ask where he'd found one. She assumed the supply bag had more than formula in it. The new shirt was dark. He'd retaped his wound himself, she could see, the gauze line straighter than she expected from a one-handed effort. He was standing at the window again. "There's a car," he said quietly. She was beside him in 4 steps. A dark SUV, parked on the far side of the street, engine off, no lights. It had not been there an hour ago. It sat with the specific stillness of a car containing people who were very good at waiting. "That's not 90 minutes, she said. "No," his voice was precise. "His data contact isn't slow." "Side exit." "Where does it come out?" "Alley behind the building. Connects to Mercer Street." "Is there a vehicle access?" "No, foot traffic only." He thought for 2 seconds. "Then we move now, alley to Mercer. I know a contact 3 blocks east, a restaurant owner who owes me a very significant favor. He'll have a vehicle we can use that won't be registered to either of our names." "Does he know what the favor's for tonight?" "He will in approximately 4 minutes when I call him." "Call him now." She was already picking up Hana's carrier. "We're not waiting." Kangmin made the call, 45 seconds. Low, precise Korean. The call ended and he pocketed the phone. "He'll have something running in the alley, behind his restaurant, in 8 minutes. "Good." She handed him Sio's carrier, watched him take it with the arm that cost him and show nothing. "Then let's go." They moved through her apartment for the last time. A place she'd lived for 2 years. A place she'd now likely not see again for a long time. A place that had spent one night being something it was never designed to be. A safe house. A waypoint between one life and whatever came next. At the door she paused and looked back once. The blanket on the chair by the window. The 2 ibuprofen tablets she hadn't gotten to the sink. The lamp still on. Ordinary, she thought. She killed the lamp and stepped into the hall. Downstairs, the building's side door opened onto the alley and the rain received them quietly. Kangmin moved slightly ahead, slightly to her left. She noticed it without remarking on it, positioning himself between her and the street side, between the bobbies and any angle that mattered. Even now. Even here. "Kangmin," she said softly, as they moved through the alley. "Yes." "When this is done," she kept her voice level, kept moving. "When you've reached Beek and shown him the evidence and Eugen is finished," she paused, "what happens to you?" He was quiet for 3 steps. "I rebuild," he said. "Secure what needs securing, return to what I'm responsible for." "And the twins?" "They stay with me," no hesitation. "Always." "They're going to need someone consistent," she said. "Someone permanent, beyond security and protocols." He glanced at her. "I know." "I'm not applying for anything." She clarified it before he could read it wrong. "I'm saying you know that, you've known it, which means that's the next problem after tonight." He was quiet again. But it was a different quiet. Not the silence of a man withholding, but the silence of a man who had just been handed a truth he'd been carrying alone and was adjusting to the weight being shared. Ahead, the lights of a running vehicle glowed at the end of the alley. Their exit. Their next step. Zara Cole, delivery driver. Inglewood raised, $4 in her account, never planned for any of this. Zara Cole walked toward it with a mafia boss at her side, and his children in her arms, and the absolute bone-deep certainty that after tonight, ordinary was a place she was walking away from for good. She wasn't sure yet if that was a loss. She was beginning to suspect it wasn't. Chairman Beek answered the door himself. That said something. A man of his position at 4 a.m, opening his own door instead of sending security. That was either extraordinary trust or extraordinary curiosity. Zara suspected it was both. He was older than she'd imagined. 70s, maybe. Small and precise in the way of men who had once been formidable and remained so through sheer accumulated authority. He wore a robe and glasses and looked at Kangmin Park on his doorstep, the way you look at something you'd calculated a 30% chance of ever seeing again. His eyes moved to Zara, to the twins. He stepped back and opened the door wider. No words yet, just that. The house was large and understated, the wealth in it old and quiet, expressed in the quality of materials rather than their display. A fire had been recently lit in the main room. Whether by anticipation or habit, Zara couldn't tell. She settled the twins near its warmth while Kangmin and Chairman Beek stood at the center of the room and spoke in Korean too low and too fast for her to follow. She didn't need to follow it. She watched Beek's face instead. That told her everything. The progression from caution to attention to something colder and more focused. The expression of a man being handed information that was reorganizing everything he thought he knew. His eyes moved once to Zara during the conversation. A brief, assessing look, then back to Kangmin. Kangmin produced the encoded drive, a clinical procedure that Zara kept her eyes away from, giving him what privacy the moment allowed. When she looked back, a small device sat on the table between them and Beek was holding it with the particular careful grip of someone handling something significant. Then Kangmin said something that made Beek go very still. Zara watched the old man's jaw tighten, watched something cold move through his eyes. He asked a question, sharp, brief. Kangmin answered, one sentence. Beek set the drive down, picked up his phone, made a call that lasted 40 seconds and ended with 3 words spoken in a tone that needed no translation. It was done, whatever it was. He's convening an emergency council session, Kangmin said, turning to Zara. 3 hours. The evidence will be reviewed before Eugen can make his morning move. And Eugen. Beek has 2 council members he trusts completely. They're being contacted now. He paused. Eugen won't know the session is happening until he walks into it. Zara looked at the old man, who had moved to a desk in the corner, and was writing something by hand with the focused calm of someone executing a plan they'd been waiting years to have reason to use. He wanted this, she said quietly. Beek has suspected Eugen for 8 months. Kangmin's voice was low. He didn't have proof. He didn't have me. A pause. He had neither until tonight. So we were the missing pieces. You were. He looked at her steadily. I was a corpse in a warehouse 6 hours ago. You changed the outcome. Zara looked at Hannah, drowsy in the warmth of the fire, her small face soft and untroubled in the way only the very young can manage in the middle of catastrophe. She didn't respond to that. She wasn't sure she had the right words for it yet. The 3 hours passed in a strange, suspended state. Not quite peace, not quite tension, but something in between. Beek's housekeeper appeared without fanfare and produced formula at the correct temperature without being asked, which suggested the old man's household was accustomed to unusual requests at unusual hours. The twins were fed and settled. Zara sat near the fire and let the warmth work on muscles she hadn't realized were locked until they began to release. Kangmin did not sit. He stood near the window, watching, thinking, running through whatever calculations occupied a man like him in the hours before something decisive. At one point, Beek approached Zara directly, stood before her, and studied her with eyes that had seen a great deal and forgotten very little. You found him, he said. His English was precise and careful. By accident, she said. There are no accidents in this world. He tilted his head slightly. Only intersections we didn't plan for. He paused. You stayed. The bobbies. Many people would have left the bobbies and run. He said it simply, without judgment, as a statement of observable fact about human behavior. You did not. He looked at her for another moment. Then he nodded once, a small, complete gesture, and returned to his desk. Zara stared at the fire. The council session convened at 7 a.m. in a private room in a building downtown that looked like a law firm and contained nothing so simple. Zara stayed in the car with the twins and a man named T, one of Beek's personal security, quiet and professional, and apparently instructed to treat her with a deference she didn't know what to do with. She fed the twins, watched the building entrance, waited. Kangmin had gone in looking the way he always looked, composed, unhurried, wearing borrowed clothes and a taped wound, and the complete and unshakable authority of a man who understood that how you enter a room determines everything that happens in it. She thought about Marcus, about what he'd told her once, sitting on their front steps on a summer night when she was 14, and the neighborhood was doing what it did, and she'd asked him how he knew which situations to walk toward and which to walk away from. "You don't always know," he'd said. "Sometimes you just move and figure out what you're doing while you're doing it. The ones who freeze trying to make the perfect choice, they're the ones who get caught in the middle." She hadn't frozen. She'd moved. 40 minutes after he entered the building, Kangmin walked back out. Alone, no urgency in his stride, no visible injury beyond the slight adjustment in how he carried his left side. He crossed the pavement and opened the car door and sat and was quiet for 10 seconds. "It's done," he said. Zara exhaled. Eugen walked into the session expecting to present a motion for my removal. Kangmin's voice was even. He walked into a room where 8 council members had spent 40 minutes reviewing 11 months of evidence against him. A pause. He didn't speak for almost a minute. I'm told that was the first time in his life he had nothing to say. "What happens to him?" "The council handles it." He said it with the flatness of a door closing. "It won't be quick, and it won't be painless, and it is no longer my concern." Zara nodded, looked at Sio and the carrier. The baby was awake, examining his own fingers with the intense scholarly focus of someone encountering them for the first time. "And your organization?" she asked. "Damaged, manageable. It will take months to rebuild the trust that Eugen compromised." He was quiet for a moment, "but it will be rebuilt." "The twins are safe." "Yes." She nodded again, stared at the building, at the gray Chicago morning breaking over the skyline like something cautious. "I need to get a new phone," she said. "File the lost delivery orders, figure out whether I still have a job." She thought briefly. "And my apartment is probably not something I can go back to." "No," he turned to look at her. "You can't." "I know." "Zara." She looked at him. His face was doing that thing, the thing where the tactical layer thinned and what was underneath came to the surface. She was beginning to learn the texture of it, beginning to recognize the specific quality of his attention when it stopped being strategic and became something else entirely. "I owe you a debt," he said carefully. "That has no reasonable unit of measurement." "You don't owe me anything." "I owe you my children's lives." He said it quietly, precisely. "Those are not words I use lightly or incorrectly." She looked at him steadily. "I want to offer you something," he continued. "Not as payment. Payment would insult what you did." He paused. "As a choice, one you can refuse completely, and I will ensure your safety and your circumstances regardless." "What choice?" He was quiet for a moment. In the back seat, Hannah made a soft, demanding sound, not quite a cry, just a declaration of presence. The sound of someone who had decided the world should know she was in it. Something moved across Kangmin's face, private and quick and gone. "My household needs someone the twins trust," he said. "Someone with judgment and nerve and the particular quality of calm that cannot be trained into a person. It either exists or it doesn't." He looked at her. "It exists in you. You're offering me a job. I'm offering you a life that looks nothing like the one you had." He held her gaze. "With full autonomy, full security, every resource you need to pursue whatever you want to pursue, including the paramedic training you set aside." A pause. "The twins need consistency. I am building something that needs to last, and I find," he stopped, "the closest thing to careful she'd ever heard from him. I find that I trust very few people. I trusted Eugen for 11 years and was wrong. I have known you for 6 hours, and I am not wrong." Zara looked at him for a long moment. She thought about her apartment, the window she'd chosen on purpose, the second-hand couch, the $47 and the 4 deliveries she'd never completed, and the life that had been narrowing so gradually she'd almost stopped noticing. She thought about Hannah's eyes in the lamplight, about a man who packed blankets while running for his life, about a woman named Minjung who went back for a diaper bag and made sure her children were safe first. "I want the paramedic training," she said. "Done. I make my own schedule with the twins. I'm not staff. She searched for the word. "Trusted," he said, quietly. with a weight that made it mean something different than its ordinary definition. She looked at him. "Trusted," she repeated. In the back seat, Hana had grabbed Sio's sleeve and was holding it with the absolute conviction of someone who had decided what was theirs. Sio tolerated it with the patience of someone who'd already learned how his sister operated. Zara almost smiled. She did smile, small, turned back to the windshield before it became something she had to explain. "We need to get them fed," she said, "and you need a doctor, a real one." "I know one." "Of course you do." She started the car. The Chicago morning opened ahead of them, gray and wide, and indifferent to the events of the last 6 hours, the way cities are indifferent to everything. The streets were waking up, delivery drivers navigating their routes, ordinary people beginning ordinary days. Zara pulled out of the lot. Beside her, Kangmin Park said nothing, but in the particular quality of his silence, the way it had shifted from guarded to settled, from tactical to something that had no name in his language or hers, she could feel it. The decision made. The direction set. She had walked into a warehouse at the wrong address to deliver food to no one and had come out the other side of something she didn't have a word for yet. Not a fairy tale, not a rescue. Something more complicated and more real than either, two people built by difficult lives and precise instincts, moving toward each other the way certain things move. Not by accident, not by plan. By intersection. By staying. By the choice, made in the dark with no good options, to simply not leave. She was safest, she realized, the moment the most dangerous man in the city looked up from a warehouse floor and decided she was worth protecting. And he was saved, fully, completely, in every way that mattered, the moment she decided he was worth staying for. The city moved around them. The twins slept. And Zara Cole drove forward into whatever came next with both hands on the wheel and her eyes wide open.